Hey, everybody. Here we are. Start to talk about a topic like we always do. And let me just, without further ado, just get it going, and we'll check this out and give it a talk about. Here's the clip.
Women are attracted, generally speaking, the research shows, to men based on three reasons. The third is kindness. They don't want someone who's going to be a good person. They're impressed by men who are good to their parents and kind and go out of their way to help people when there's no reciprocal expectation. The second is intelligence, because the smarter you are, the more likely you are to make good decisions and protect your family's offspring. And by the way, the fastest way to communicate intelligence is humor. I've always said if you can make a woman laugh, you can kiss her.
Wow.
And then the most important thing, though, to women, and people don't like to admit this, is the man's ability to signal future resources. It's not even he has to be rich now, but he has to have his act together such that he looks like he will be a decent provider.
Okay, here we go again. Two guys talking about what women want. And, he didn't have any problem.
This is what women want. I think we did that one a while back, and I'm like immediately like, shut up, come on. This guy feels like he's a little bit more solid in what he's saying. But like, yeah, obviously, let's just start with women want a whole lot of things for a whole lot of reasons. What I think he means by this is, like, generally speaking, probably in the Western world, this may be different in different cultures, but generally speaking, maybe even not this is what women want. It's like, if you want to attract women, trust that these three things are probably the most important. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I would, being a man and knowing what I know,
right,
which is a hell of a lot, and being a therapist as well, an archetypal therapist specifically, I don't have any problem with what he's saying. I think particularly the first two are rather broad. I think that men would want those things as well: kindness and intelligence. Maybe not. Maybe it's different. I know Cindy, my wife, listened to this before now, and I said, as she made the comment about men deciding what women want, and I said, do you think he's wrong? And she goes, no, I actually don't. So, and she said as much before. She says how attractive intelligence in particular is to women. And, again, from a very fundamental archetypal basis, intelligence and even kindness, you wouldn't think, but kindness, I think you certainly can frame it this way. And what I think he says for the first one is quite interesting, that access to resources, I think is very, very powerful. And the intelligence has something to do with that. I mean, it's like you know how to figure this out. And all those do point to this very fundamental, again, male masculine archetypal idea of providing and protecting and feeling secure and feeling safe. Yeah. And that is fundamentally what we would come away from.
Yeah, and that's why
with these.
No, totally. And that's why, like to my point from the beginning, I think, right, as long as we recognize that we're talking about archetypally, we're talking about the influences behind the scenes, then it's not about what women want and what men want. It's what the masculine or what the feminine wants from the masculine.
Exactly. Very well put.
Yeah.
Very, very important to say that.
You go underneath. But I also want to say another thing, like to Cindy's point, right? Like, I mean, I get it, right? Two guys are talking about what women want, what the fuck, men should shut the fuck up. No. Look, if a woman said, hey, this is what men want from women, do you think there would be the same response? Now, I get it that no, because women don't, quote unquote, mansplain in the same way. But my reaction is like, there's no reason on earth why a man can't know at a profound level what women want even more than what some women would know about the topic. And that's not misogyny. That's just the fact. Do you think that there are some women out there that know better what men want than what men do? Of course there are.
Of course there are. Yeah, absolutely.
But the whole idea that men have no right to be speaking about women, what women want, I mean, it's like it's a joke. It's often presented as a joke, and it should be, because it is one.
Well, I think, in Cindy's defense.
I'm sorry, Cindy. I'm not attacking
No,
you.
no. I think she was saying it. I mean, she was laughing when she was saying it. And I say to her, she hasn't watched every one of our things. She has a couple of them, but I say to her that we're always doing that. You and I are always saying, well, what the fuck do we know? It's like we know as much as we know. And I do think men, if you did a broad survey of it, I do think men that think about it and that aren't blocked by complexes and trauma and whatever,
Right.
do know fundamentally in their heart, at least, what they need. And I think they know that better than the average woman. But there are a lot of women that do that know this. Obviously, the most successful women that have the most successful relationships do know.
Oh yeah.
So some pretty deep shit. They know more than the men do.
Oh yeah.
Consciously, I mean, men are very unconscious about those things. They're much more likely to be wrong about that. Now, of course, I'm just saying the opposite to that. I know I'm contradicting myself here, but anyway, these are broad strokes anyhow, and it's just like what you said. It's not even so much what women want as it is what the feminine wants from the masculine.
Yeah,
in an archetypal perspective. So let's we can just kind of stick with that. And
yeah, well, one more point on the archetypal perspective. I think it's really important to sort of notice how that an archetypal perspective lends itself to a kind of Neoplatonic attitude. Let me unpack that for those who don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. The Platonic concept of you already know. It just needs to be drawn out of you. These are these universals, and I think this is kind of, I think, what your point is. Everybody has a connection in the collective unconscious to these things, and that's why when you're doing archetypal work, it's never about you discovering something new. It's about you giving a name for a thing that you already feel. So when you're guiding people in a relationship, it's like this is your point. Yeah, male-bodied people holding the masculine, they can tune into what it is. Maybe they can't name it. And so the work is like, that thing, that is called kindness, that's called intelligence, and that's called, signaling future resources. And they go, oh, well, I know what that is. And they're able to make that jump, right? But it's like, I think it's a felt sense. And it's one that everyone has access to already and doesn't need to be taught it as if it's a brand new concept. It's that they need to be guided to see and to connect that those things are going together. Does that make sense? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And these are also all of these things that we talk about are ideals as well. I mean, everybody's different. I mean, there's certainly a lot of men that have very successful relationships that have an IQ of 80 or something. I mean, it's not like the only way you're going to be successful in your relationship is to be incredibly intelligent. There's a difference too between high IQ and really being like street smart, and being able to decipher things and, whatever. And I don't know if that's even measurable.
Yeah, but it's also to what ends, right? Because you're right. Certainly there are. It's obvious that there are men who are of measurably low intelligence on, for example, an IQ scale, who make tremendous partners. Why?
Right.
Well, because it's the intelligence to what end? His point was intelligence, so they make good choices to protect the family.
Right.
So you can be nominally sort of like stupid on an IQ scale, but be so tuned in to making the right choices that you don't need to be able to sort of theorize.
Yeah, that's a much better way to put it. Yeah.
But then also, because intelligence too, I think we should probably break it down, because I think really behind this is not just like mental intelligence, but emotional intelligence, because you have to have the two. You can be Elon Musk, who's off the charts intelligent, but because I think he's, what is he, Asperger's?
I don't know.
Then there's this story, but he goes to Auschwitz and he doesn't cry. People use this as an example of, he must be a Nazi because he didn't cry at Auschwitz. It's like, no, because it's Asperger's. It's like, that's why, but he's really intelligent on that level, but maybe emotionally he kind of is a little bit stunted, right?
Right.
And they're very different things. And so a guy who doesn't have Elon Musk intelligence, but can tune in on an emotional level to what's important and make the right decisions, and that might actually make a better partner.
Right.
Even though he's not technically.
Well, the whole idea of intelligence I mean, just what you're saying, and people measure intelligence with the IQ standard. That's absolutely limited. It's like it doesn't cover anything. I mean, there's a certain kind of logic reasoning that it does cover, but that's not what we're talking about.
But even if it wasn't, I'm just using that as a kind of like stand-in for whatever. I mean, there's certainly a huge difference between people who have the capacity of critical thinking at a high level and those who don't. Maybe someone who's like, let's give it a different example, not the IQ test, but someone who has the capacity to do well on an SAT test or something, But yeah, and also I wanted to, this is a good time to dive into that one because I want to unpack it. As a student of jiu-jitsu, I'm like, oh, I get what you mean, because it's not strength. One of the reasons why this is a bit, kind of like, ooh, he's saying something differently, because it's not strength. The intelligence piece, though, those are kind of connected in a way, because it's like he says intelligence to protect. Well, when we think of protection, we almost always think of intelligence or strength, but no, because it's not your capacity for brute force or your capacity for courage or your physical strength. It's your intelligence to use it, and that's what jiu-jitsu teaches you. It's not the strength; it's the strategy. And a smaller opponent who has less physical strength and less weight can beat a stronger guy with intelligence. Like and then that's the kind of beauty of it, because it's actually a better way to physically dominate a person is to use your intelligence, not use your strength. And the practice of jiu-jitsu, why I love it, is that it constantly teaches you, don't rely on brute force. Don't rely on your capacity to overwhelm a person through whatever. You have to be a better strategist ultimately if you want to not just be better at submitting your opponent, but actually have a long, healthy, fun career in jiu-jitsu. Because if the other problem is, not only are you not effective, you can't submit people, but you're going to hurt yourself and other people, which stops you.
I would have a tendency to want to refine the word intelligence to say attentiveness. That there's something about again, we're talking about what is intelligence. It's this formulation of the mind to be able to make these decisions and whatever. But it seems to me that it's more of a positive attribute that we're looking at with the male female or relationship is attentiveness. It's almost like everything gets boiled down to that. If you pay attention, if you have attentiveness toward your partner. And that can include things like prioritizing, which we hear all the time in couples therapy. Well, my husband doesn't prioritize me. And it's like, well, what does that mean really? Does that mean he'll put any of your whims like in front of anything? Like if he has some big business deal that he's going to make and, you have a toothache or something, is that what prioritizing means to you? So it's more of attentiveness. It's more like I'm paying attention to that. I'm attentive of your needs, but I can still decide I need to go to this meeting at work and not stay at home with you. That's still attentiveness, even though he's choosing not to stay at home. That's more prioritizing. And there's a lot of confusion with my couples, at least. I mean, I'm sure in other areas too, about this idea of prioritizing and attentiveness. It's like attentiveness, though, you don't really have to be that intelligent to be attentive. No. And anyway, that's
I got it. And I think a good example of that would be like, I'm going to have to go to this meeting and not be with you. Hey, but I can recognize that how that's going to affect you. Hey, I'm sorry that I know that was important for you to be,
exactly. That's how you would negotiate it. That's how you would deal with it, is to say, how do I show that I'm attentive rather than cancel my meeting?
Yes.
Okay. You would show that attentiveness by listening, by saying, tell me about this. Tell me what it is that you feel you need from me right now. I want to hear it. You can still decide not to do what your partner says. I would like for you to stay here. I would like for you to say fuck you to your meeting and stay with me. You can go, well, let me listen to you. Okay, I hear you would rather me stay here. Okay, I don't think that would be best. I don't think it'd be best for either one of us. I don't think you need that. You could have that opinion. You may be wrong to say that. Maybe she does need it, but you're still paying attention
Yeah.
You're showing attentiveness, and attentiveness a lot of times is demonstrated through listening. Yeah. And through really listening. I mean, truly listening, not just sitting there and empathizing, just like you said. That's the empathy.
And being able to reflect back, which it's true. And I mean, you probably know this, right, from couples work. And how often will it come down to, I just needed you to know how important that evening was that you were canceling.
That's
not
right.
That you canceled, but that you didn't acknowledge that I was good. Because sorry, I can't make it. I'll see it at 10, as opposed to, hey, I know this is really going to be hard. Right. I can't make it, but and it's actually quite fascinating. As you know, you talk about emotional maturity. It's actually quite fascinating, and this is particularly with women. Okay, we'll talk about man-women heterosexual relationship. Sure. That women tune into that and they get that. Which I find quite fascinating. Like, I'll sit there and I'll go, okay, she's going to be really pissed off that he doesn't sit there and say, you're right, I should have canceled the goddamn meeting and been there with you. Yeah. You know, that's what she wants. She wants you to cancel the meeting. And it isn't. No. It isn't. I mean, they're almost without exception, they'll say, you know, if you just indicated to me that you knew how important this was to me and still went to the meeting, that would have done it. And I'm like going, wow, that's like pretty cool. And they get that. I don't think men get that. I mean, I think men are a lot stupider than that. I don't think they get that. I do know it's true. It's true. I think you're right about that. But I also think it's interesting because the way that you present it, like as attentiveness rather than intelligence, that actually now is a synthesis of the first two that he says, because it's
yes, it is. It is
intelligence.
Yes.
Yeah. Which interestingly enough, you know, when in Tantra, in like the metaphysics of the sort of whole cosmos, it boils down to, you know, these two fundamentals about the whole existence. Is it love or is it consciousness? And Tantra goes, it's loving consciousness. That's the balance. That's the polarity of the feminine. And that's exactly what is embedded in this. It's attentiveness. It's loving intelligence. It's intelligence that's guided toward me being able to know how to love you in a way that you can feel it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where you get to this idea that no matter how culturally stupid, like if the culture wants to measure your intelligence and has decided you have the IQ of a walnut, you know, that it's like 10 or something, that you can't have a relationship. But what you're saying, the conscious loving, it doesn't matter what your brain can put in, unless it's damaged or something. I mean, and intelligence can't get that low or else you wouldn't survive. All right. But even at the minimal amount that you're a human being, that you're considered a human being, if you have that loving consciousness, then that is the intelligence that you need.
Yeah. You know, this is reminding me of, have you seen the film, it's Peanut Butter Falcon?
No.
Shia LaBeouf. And so it's I'm going to fuck up the premise if I try to remember it. But basically, the two main characters are in this kind of this buddy kind of adventure movie, right? Where they're on this odyssey together. One of them being developmentally challenged, the other one being a kind of uneducated criminal, right? But now that we're talking about this, it's like, oh, right. What that movie is about those two men finding loving intelligence beyond anything that would be measurable. Okay. Because, and, you know, I think there's a million examples of this too that we've seen. Like, okay, here's an example: Forrest Gump.
Good point.
Lovable, and in fact, you know, he loves Jenny in a way that sort of like that really is like astounding because it's so innocent. But again, he's not. I mean, the whole point of Forrest Gump is that he is like incredibly low in intelligence, but then it gives him access to this profound wisdom of simplicity, this sort of Zen.
Yeah, well, that's such a good example. Of course, it was intended to be an example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's as far as this intelligence part of it. And I guess we're dwelling on this because the listeners that are listening to this, they don't want to think, well, women are attracted to intelligence. Does that mean, I flunked all my courses in university or whatever, then I'm not going to be attractive to anybody. And I do think there is an element to intelligence in that context, in that framing, that is positive. Because it ties into the first and the last thing this guy says, which is, I think in our culture, it does take intelligence to have those resources lined up, the potential resources. Of course, if we're using Forrest Gump as an example, that's not the case there either. The guy becomes incredibly wealthy with his shrimp company. It's like, was that intelligence that created that? It certainly isn't presented that way. So
I think the whole that whole parable is about when you don't know, you can't. There's nothing to stop you.
Right.
James Hillman has I think he had a whole thing on that. Positive. I think it was negative of you anyway. But no, signaling future resources too, right? I mean, yeah, that could be the intelligence to do it, to sort of manage future resource issues. But it could also be like, well, if you are just like so loving and committed to your family that you're willing to be hardworking and disciplined and devoted to your work. Right. I mean, that's the tortoise and the hare. I mean, the tortoise is going to get there.
Yeah.
Because they're so dedicated and they are not attentive. They're attentive. They're not distracted.
Yeah.
Highly intelligent man could easily be distracted by his own pursuit of some intellectual or academic.
Oh, absolutely. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we can't preclude. I mean, we can't say that intelligence can be a factor in achieving these two things. It's not the only factor. It can be one, especially in our culture now. I mean, it's like, it seems that the more intelligent you are, the more likely you're rewarded. And that's not always true, but it certainly seems that way. I mean, that's the whole focus on getting an engineering degree or a medical degree or whatever, because you're more guaranteed success financially, because the culture kind of allows that to happen more likely. That's not anybody in particular. That's the culture. That's the value the culture puts in those kinds of professions.
I think the other point too is that it's not, and this can be, I think, confusing. It's like, it's not that the feminine doesn't feel attraction to people that don't have those qualities, but it's like, but I can't commit to it. It's like, wow, I really want to be able to commit to a relationship with you and really sort of put things on the line to make this happen. But if you don't have these qualities, it's just like, I'm going to end up heartbroken, so I can't.
Yeah, but you know what? That being said, I don't know if you would have a woman that would be attracted to meanness and hatefulness, to stupidity, and to I mean healthily attracted. I mean, there's certainly women that are attracted to those things, but they're self-sabotagers.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, they're wounded at various. Let's just sit with the healthy.
Because we all know a million examples of women.
Oh yeah, we certainly do. Yeah, we certainly do.
Your point being that no, we're talking about when it's coming from a place of wholeness and not a place of
exactly
a wounded part that's trying to get that's stuck in. That they're going to change this guy and he'll find.
And that's a really good point just to throw in here. We don't need to, unless you want to. We don't need to go into a lot of detail with it. But he's assuming with these three things that you're dealing with a healthy psyche. That you're dealing, because there's very clearly, if you have an unwhole situation here, that you will actually be attracted to the opposite things, because it's fulfilling some unconscious system. So it isn't like somebody listening to this go, well, I get all the women I want and I'm about as stupid as they get. Doesn't necessarily mean that won't happen. And I'm a mean son of a bitch, so.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think he's trying to, he's speaking to a regular audience, and if you want to break it down, be more specific, it's like what the feminine in its wholeness is seeking.
Yes, Yes.
to find
Yes.
that sort of polarity in the masculine in its wholeness. But of course, he's trying to speak to people who have no idea what the fuck we're talking about when we think archetypally.
Now the thing, just to throw in with that too, it's like there's an assumption that out of the box, if everybody is psychically whole, that men or the masculine is going to present those three things, because that's its natural tendency, is to be the good king that is good to people and kind and humorous. No,
not out the box. No, because it's not, because out the box is going to be immature.
But you know what I mean. I'm talking more, when I say out of the box, I more mean no life lived trauma that causes unconscious complex systems. Okay, when I say out of the box, there's nobody that's out of the box in that regard. It's a hypothetical statement.
But you're right. No, but it's actually a really good point to make, though, because this is the thing, is that that infantile masculine consciousness will never become mature without a community of elder men to initiate it and to guide it through. And that's kind of what we're suffering from mostly now, is because there's a lack of that. What you find is that so much of the masculine energy that's out there is not matured. It hasn't gone through initiatory process to become full. And so, but it's pure in a sense,
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, but you're making my statement a little more complicated than I intended. Okay, because I agree with that. I think of all, and I've said this before, I say this a million times to my clients.
Yes. I
think that the male, the archetypal male, the masculine archetypes need to be taught. I don't think the feminine ones do. I could be wrong. I'm fine to argue that, because I'd be curious. But what I've put together through my work and my reading, my education, is that the masculine archetypes, in order to mature, need to learn how to be, or else they flounder in the boy, or they become Icarus and fly up to the sun and get burned up. They need the male elders in order to hone that into a wholeness. I think it's one of the primary differences between men and women, in my view. From an archetypal perspective, I don't think women need that. I think they are pretty much, as long as nothing fucks with them as they go through their life, which of course a lot does, but as long as if they can stay as they were born, their archetypal systems are complete. Men are not. No, so I'm agreeing with you 100% there.
No, I think so, and I could break that down, because I think it's about the fact that women are given the gift of the female body, whereas men are not, and because it is built into female embodiment is a natural initiation process. So it's not built into the male body, right?
There you go. Good way to put it.
Naturally goes through, and what it needs is the loving support of the elder feminine, right, to bear witness to it and to support it and to kind of guide it. But it doesn't need any kind of active intervention. It happens on its own. Menarche happens no matter what, unless there's physiological problems, right? And what's needed is, can you hold me in this while I'm going through it, without doing much of anything, then giving me loving consciousness, loving awareness, like we were saying before.
Yeah.
But the masculine needs to be challenged, and it needs to be challenged by the mature masculine energy that can draw it out. And I think it does require more skill and more intervention, which is of course, the masculine, skilled intervention, skilled penetration, if you want to get
right.
The young boy needs to be skillfully penetrated by the elder masculine. Ooh,
yes.
That's probably where the Greeks got their ideas from. But in order for it to be drawn out. And that actually, I'm sort of joking about that, but that could actually be part of why young men were initiated through sex in ancient Greece. I don't know. But another interesting twist on this is, Bruno Bettelheim going into the whole symbolic wounds thing about how these initiatory processes, when they're physical, that involve circumcision, are actually kind of mock castration and about vagina envy. It's about this sort of scarification in a way that mimics this, and there's something about that that's sort of that on a mythopoetic level is kind of gratifying to the man who is missing this beautiful gift of a female body. Which, as I say that too, like that's not to ignore the complexity of the female body, because as much as it is a massive, huge, and sort of miraculous gift, it also becomes this incredible curse. And any woman going through menopause, any woman going through menstrual dysphoria, it's like, what the fuck. But the beautiful thing about the female body is how incredibly balanced it is. It's like, yeah, you have to go through all that stuff, but you also get to carry a child to birth to live.
Right. Well, that's the key in my view. Shoot, you said something a second ago I wanted to comment on. Now I'm not going to think of it, remember it. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Well, it'll come up.
So yeah, I'm curious to know. Tell me more about like attentiveness. I mean, because I almost feel like you kind of nailed it, because it does contain both kindness and intelligence. Yeah, and maybe I'll ask you a different question too, because when I heard that kindness thing, I'm like, right, coaching men in dating, right? It's like, what? I guarantee you, a woman will be turned off by if you're shitty to the waiter.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because what she sees in that, and even worse, in another one, if she hears you on the phone talking to your mother and you're an ass to her, there's no second date.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That has there's a deeper element to that, and then there's also the pragmatic one of there being an obvious and clear conflict with the feminine through mother. Yeah. And you can get it the other way too, if a guy is too nice to his mother and prioritizes his mother over his partner, and is overly kind. Then you get a similar kind of conflict with that, which is not as obvious. Okay, the obvious one is that you're an asshole to your mother. Well, what makes you not be an asshole to me then at some point?
If equally as bad, because the first
they're
one
equally as bad.
Well, the first one is you haven't cut the umbilical cord, so you'll never be able to attach to me if you're still that attached to mother.
Right. But it's not as obvious. You're
right. Good point.
But the kindness thing is interesting too, because the first I heard that and thinking about it, of course, not the first time I heard it, but in thinking about it, I always think of kindness from the masculine is the well-integrated king. The king is a power structure. And the culture wants to see the king as the one that sends the army out to kill the enemy and has a lot of warrior in it. And he's a tyrant. He bosses people around, and he's the king. And that's the shadow essentially. But the culture sees the king more like that than benevolent. And if you don't have the benevolent king, if you don't have the king that has the power to do whatever he wants to do, if you don't have the opposite of that, well, I may be angry with this person, but I'm not going to express that.
Yeah.
I am going to, like, if this waiter fucked up the order, I'm not going to get up and tell him, I'm a guest in this restaurant and you're an asshole. You fucked this up, and I'm going to tell you so because I'm the king here. I am the one above you. If that king can take something that the waiter screwed up and have the opportunity and the power to express the power and doesn't, then he is well-rounded. I mean, it's the whole analogy of the sword. If you can just pull the sword halfway out to let your enemy, if they're an enemy to you, know that you could slice their head off if you wanted to.
Yeah,
but don't.
Benevolence, right? I can't. Yeah, because it's the goodness that's true.
Right.
The whole point of like this is probably Jordan Peterson, the man who has no capacity for violence is not
he's dangerous.
He's not a good person.
Right.
Good man is, I have the capacity and the willingness to inflict violence upon somebody, and that, your point, benevolence to choose not to, the wisdom to choose not to. But yeah, you make a good point. But I maybe to clarify a bit, because kingship, like raw kingship, is just world building. And this was the that we may talk about in the future with Robert.
Oh, with Trump?
Talking about Trump. He will fucking Robert Moore. God, that guy.
Yeah.
Man, he's a fucking genius. So, right. But his point was the problem with Trump, and I'm sort of paraphrasing a little bit. He doesn't say
right.
my take. Yeah. The problem with Trump is that he's just pure raw king energy. He's only world building for its own sake. And he speculates what would happen if it was world building for the sake of the people. Weirdly discriminatory about what's happening now.
Yes.
Because raw kingship is just world building for its own sake. And the whole point of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, those 4 quadrants and the integration of them, is that anytime that you have one of those in its raw form, it flips into shadow. It has to be balanced in order to keep it out of shadow. So what you're saying is that the king, to the extent that it's integrated a sufficient amount of lover energy, will be benevolent. And it will be effective if he's integrated enough of the warrior energy, and will be efficient to the extent that he's integrated enough of the magician energy, right? But there's no raw kingship. Is just you building something. He makes the point that Taj Mahal, for no other reason than look what I did, but it doesn't serve anything. That's raw kingship.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that going back again to his point of the 3 things he comments on, that he links up this kindness with humor, which I think is interesting. Yeah. Because again, that is also an indication, and this is not a conscious choice on the woman's part, but she sees that well integrated man, which is the king with the 4 quadrants integrated properly, through his kindness, through his humor, and even through, if I change intelligence to attentiveness, it's an attentiveness, because then you have the trickster, you have the, you have the magician, which is closely related to, in my view, to the trickster. You have the warrior, which is an obvious one, but you got to have that too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the kindness. It's like it can't be all kindness. If somebody comes along that treats her poorly and is aggressive toward her, he's got to be able to kick his ass. Okay, so where does that fit into these 3 that he talks about?
That's a really good point. I might take a little bit of a different spin on it, because I actually think that what he's talking about here with the intelligence and humor thing. Okay, so the humor is the immature masculine in the magician quadrant in the form of the trickster. Now, why is it essential to have intelligence and to have the humor? Because here's what it means. It means that the man has evolved out of trickster, has honed that energy into magician energy, right? The capacity to do something in service of the collective, not just in service of himself, right? But hasn't cut the cord. Now, if you want to look at that in terms of parts work, it's his inner adult is still in communication with and gives permission for the immature parts to be there and be at play. And I think it's that access between the inner adult and the inner child that's essential, because an adult-child relationship that's not mitigated by parental energy, like accessing the 2, is a terrible relationship, because that's your adult magician telling your inner little boy that it's stupid to make jokes right now, so shut up. He has a healthy parental sort of attitude. The mature magician is wise enough to allow and secure enough to give space to the immature masculine trickster to make jokes and be silly. And so I think it's that access that indicates to a potential partner that's so attractive. Because if you got a guy that's disconnected from his little boy inside of him, who doesn't let him give him any fucking space, he's going to be a tyrannical father.
And a dullard as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now the humor thing is very interesting, because there is such a gamut with humor. There isn't so much with things like kindness or whatever. There is an extreme to kindness if you have no warrior access. If somebody treats you poorly and you're going, oh, I still, The humor thing, though, man, if you're inappropriate, if you tease, that's your form of humor, is teasing your partner, making fun of them, and everybody at the table laughs but her. That's a whole different scene.
Oh boy.
That is not attractive.
We could do a whole series of podcasts on
I know.
dangers of letting any kind of of leash on that little trickster.
Right.
Fuck everything up. It wants to. That's his whole point. His whole
Oh
reason.
yeah, it's his whole point.
Give
You're
me a
damn right.
boundary. He's waiting. He's like, please give me any kind of boundary so that I can transgress it, and I'll do it with glee. So, but that's the point I'm making, right? Is that you have to have this strong access to give him enough reign, the trickster enough reign, but you have to have the maturity and the warrior energy to keep him contained. But
that's what integration is all about.
Look, if you have a healthy relationship to your trickster, that means that you got a shit ton of self energy, to use IFS terms, right? You have some hardcore executive function in the system. You have real kingship, because that is such difficult energy to manage. So a man who knows how to be a little boy in the right way, to let that out and to not have it fuck things up, is really indicating a level of mastery over self that I think is highly attractive, right?
Huge.
Because the two polarities, one who has no access to his little boy, who is just ruthlessly kind of cold and like utilitarian, and kind of and void. No, that's no good, because there's no soul in that. And then but the man who's a man child and who doesn't know the difference and will like tease people relentlessly and make jokes inappropriately and make jokes that cause harm unduly, that's a danger too. I mean, I think that's why comedians do so well. Most comedians there's a lot of comedians that are very attractive men, women, everyone in between. But it's interesting to me that, like, you take a guy who's like, ooh, that guy is not an attractive looking gentleman, but he gets up on an open mic and kills, and he's walking out the door with the hottest woman in the room, because that is so potent, that energy. Just the ability. I mean, I don't know if you've ever even thought of what it would be like to be able to do stand-up comedy. There's something about that takes so much bravery, so much confidence, so much kind of,
But don't you see that as contained energy as well? That I don't know if a comedian that is really sharp and says whatever he wants to say and people laugh at him, if he did that to his partner, the same kind of cut, the same kind of it's like, I mean, a lot of that is that transference thing. I mean, and projection is that you sit in the audience and you go, fuck, I wish I could say that. I wish I could be that clever. I wish I could be that honest.
That's where hecklers come from, is because they don't know how to stop themselves from, I can do that too. See, I'll do it right now. Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. I mean, my point being that what's truly attractive is someone, and in this case, I'm talking about men, a man who can do that really skillfully. Right. And she also has a sense that he knows how to turn it off. He's not going to do that with the mother first. He's going to sort of make a dirty joke with her. No, but I think that like that's a strong pull, and I think that kind of accounts for why comedians do quite well in terms of romance, because it's a really attractive quality.
Yeah, it is. It's a freedom as well. It's this whole idea of being who you are and saying what you think. And I mean, that is the trickster. I mean, obviously, the jesters in courts, the whatever he is, makes fun of the king. He's the only one that can do that. And because that's his job is to point out the king's silliness or the king's whatever. And a lot of them got killed for it. But the king generally knew, I'm not going to kill the jester, because everybody knows he's supposed to be an asshole, that's his job.
No, the king doesn't kill the jester, because then the minute he does, he's exposed himself as a tyrant. In fact, it proves you to, like, this is why the king, the wise king, will say, the jester's coming to the court and he's going to mock me relentlessly, and I'm inviting everyone to come and witness while I take it. Without and I think
that's a good king, though. They're not all good.
But I think another attractive quality in a comedian, especially one who's like self-deprecating on stage, is like, partly what the feminine sees in that is like, oh, you can actually take feedback. You can have someone point out your flaws and not crumble. Because a man who can take that kind of heat, it's like, when she needs to push back and say, hey, can I reflect something back to you that you might not want to hear? Right. That's definitely a signal of a relationship that's going nowhere. If the minute you give any kind of criticism, he just, collapses into his shell. Right.
Or he becomes tyrannical I don't know if I've ever actually seen this,
right.
but obviously if there's a heckler in the audience and the comedian gets really pissed off about it, he loses all of that positive. He's got to be clever. He's got to be able to come back to the heckler and put them down in his humor. And if he does that, he's fine. But if he gets really angry, and you can tell, then that magic goes away almost instantly. And
man, for sure. And that's a huge turn off, right? Is a man who can control his temper, because if he can't control his temper with the heckler, he might not control his temper with you.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, you're right. No, and I think, but if you have that level of warriorship where I will engage fearlessly, but I'm wise enough to call on magician energy to do it with such grace that you barely, I don't even need to draw my sword. But you're right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But then also I think too that there's something like, okay, it depends on what the heckle is, because some heckles actually demand to be like, it's like, oh, you're asking me, do I have enough self-respect to do what and crush you in front of everybody? Because sometimes I think that's what's necessary. And again, if we're making this sort of metaphor of like how can a man who's doing stand-up comedy become attractive? It's like if someone profoundly disrespects something that's sacred to you, it's a very attractive quality for you to meet it with equal force.
Even with a comedian?
So
I mean, doesn't that make you a tyrant, just like the king? If the jester says something that's really serious and truthful, that the king should not meet him with his power and say, you can't offend me that way.
It's different. It's different. King gesture is a different thing. But I'm trying to think of a good example. But there is something that a heckler could shout in the audience that would demand that the comedian, if he was to show himself as stewarding masculinity in its fullness, would require him to shut it down, right? Like with brutality, with like absolute crushing brutality. I can't. I wish I could think of.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, I've always
said that. I mean, if you're looking for an example, go look at Dave Chappelle, because people will cross boundaries with that guy, and he will crush them. And it's like, no, but he's crushing that person because they actually came after something that's sacred in a way that required it. I wish I could give you a better example.
No, I think I know what you mean. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where he departs from the comedian and he actually takes them down from a warrior perspective as opposed to the trickster.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's a good point. But you're right. We do have to make a distinction, because if you're using your example of king jester, because the power dynamic is too off. Right, because the king has monopoly on state power for violence, and using that against a person.
Right, where the comedian doesn't.
He doesn't have total control over the monopoly.
Right,
he can't. Right. He's not above the law. The king is. So that's a different.
Right, right. That's a good point. Yeah,
he may be cultivating kingship in that he's the king of the room in that moment.
Yeah, right.
Which is why they cannot be challenged, because that's the whole point, is that if the heckler challenges the kingship of the comedian in that moment, and he falls from grace and he doesn't have sovereignty, or they don't have sovereignty if it's a woman, then he can't command the room, because he's a fallen idol, and it won't work. He's lost.
Yeah, and if you flip that around, where it's a comedian, the audience that's the king, and the comedian is the jester in that court. He's still not the jester. The comedian is not directly confronting the audience. He doesn't pick out the heckler. The heckler comes to him first, and then turns it into an individual communication between the comedian and the heckler.
Yeah.
It's not the whole audience. Anyway, I mean, who cares?
No, but my final point can be something like, but I think the other interesting thing to point out, though, is that hecklers are always take the risk of sort of exposing themselves as being fundamentally selfish. And I think that's why the crowd will usually delight in that being, like, because selfishness and narcissism is so ugly. We all suffer from it. And so if the comedian uses his power to annihilate that, we all kind of like, ooh.
They love it. Yeah, they love it. Yeah.
Crush the narcissist. I can't crush the narcissist in my life, but you can crush this fucking guy.
Exactly.
He could take over.
Exactly. That's a really good way to look at it.
Everybody gets a little aroused at the idea that this guy can shut down this blowhard. Yeah.
Let's go to the third idea, and then we've touched on it a little bit.
This future resources. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that is a good one.
He does a good job of he's right. It's always a little bit more nuanced. It's not just wealth.
Right.
A lot of idiots with a lot of money, and it's not attractive. But it's that I have signal future resources. Like I was saying before about the attractiveness of the less than intelligent kind of man, but who is like unflappably loyal and disciplined and hardworking in proportions to his loyalty, right? Because it's like nothing will like. And maybe more about that whole point about intelligence, because he won't be distracted by all this magician energy that's going to pull him down rabbit holes of interest that will take his eyes off of the bottom line for the family system, which is preservation and protection, whatever, right? So give me a man who has no other interest than being a king of his own domain, and you can trust at a certain level that long term he'll be able to provide in a way. He's not distracted.
No.
It's part of the reason why like lover energy is always downplayed when you think about like Andy Griffith and the Andy Griffith Show and how masculinity is presented through him. What's interesting is that the sensation function is so interestingly stewarded. He's very sensitive and he's very feminine because there's no mother in the picture,
right.
but he's not a lover. He always goes on these dates that don't quite but you can trust him as a father and a mother both to Opie, because he doesn't have a wandering eye, because his eye is on his kingship as the sheriff over the land and his commitment to his boy, and the women won't distract him. Take that same character and like inflate the lover to the point where he has interest in women, and suddenly he becomes less safe. And the future resource is that he will continue to be who he is. He's never going to change the situation that Opie and Aunt B are in with him, because he's integrating this new woman. You can trust that he won't do that, and there's a safety in that, I think, because he's so dedicated and simple-minded and kind of.
Well, we go back to that idea of attentiveness, and this is something that I run against all the time with my couples, and I'm gonna present this like it's a lopsided thing, and I don't want to offend women in general with this, or women in a partnership with this, but there seems to be, to me, a misunderstanding of a balance. Like men will, let's just say a typical relationship where the man goes out and he works and his focus is on his work, and he spends a lot of time at work, and he makes a fair amount of money. It's certainly enough to provide for the family. He's got 2 kids and a wife that just maintains the household, takes care of the kids. Then we have the conflict that she says he's not at home enough. He doesn't help me around the house. He doesn't take care of the kids the way I do. I have to deal with the kids almost 24/7. He can come home and the kids jump all over him and love that dad's home and whatever, but then he can, he can sit, watch a TV show or go take a bath or go to bed. Of course, men don't take baths. Sorry. Take a shower and go to bed. Okay. I take baths all the time. That's why I said that. That's the joke. Okay. Yeah. But anyway, the point here is that if you talk to that man, he will say, not all the time, but he will say, you think I would go to work and work that hard if I didn't have 2 kids and a wife at home? You really think I would do that? I would go and play. I'd have fun with my friends. Yeah, whatever. You really think I would work that hard? And she, of course, says, oh, yeah, because you love it. You love being the man, and you love going out with all your work colleagues and working your ass off at work because you love it. It's all about you. And where is that? Where is... you could say, and I'd be curious to know what you think of this. You could say that when a man has a family and a partner, that is the only priority. That is his sacrifice. And you see a meme all the time where a man is hunched over holding his wife and his child, and he's got all these swords in his back. I don't know if you've ever seen that, where it's like, this is the ultimate masculine archetypal sacrifice.
Yeah, but that's it's unbalanced though. Anyway, sorry, finish your thought and I'll chime in.
It is in a sense, but if a man really believes that his purpose at this time in his life is to provide for his family. Yeah. Now, if his family doesn't appreciate that, his kids probably do because they don't know any better. But if the wife, if his partner doesn't see that for its value that it is and the sacrifice that it is, then he will lose his sense of providing. I mean, he won't be able to connect the two. I am providing for my family, but they don't think I am. So
yeah, that's archetypal possession. She's worried that he's an archetypal possession, that he is in the warrior quadrant because he's obsessed with making money for its own sake, not for making money to support the family.
That's what she thinks.
Exactly. Well, that's what she's supposed to be. She's supposed to, or she's not supposed to. She should, if she's wise enough, be able to, or take on the responsibility of making sure that he is not using, either he's not an archetypal possession where he's just doing work for its own sake and ignoring the family. It's not work so I can support the family. It's work so that I can aggrandize my ego. And second of all, he's not using it as an ego defense, because it's like, oh, if I'm trying to avoid dysfunction within my family system, the number one place a man's going to hide is going to be work. And Robert Moore, speaking of him, goes into a great thing about that, about, workaholism as a defense against dysfunction in the family, and also feelings of inadequacy within, and it's not even, it doesn't take a whole lot of pathology in a man or a lot of dysfunction in the system to make that pull really easy, because I think it's
absolutely and it tricks them into they don't necessarily consciously know that's what they're doing.
Yes,
they're easily tricked into believing that they're doing this only to provide for the family, but in reality they're not.
Ebenezer Scrooge is so terrified.
Oh yes, good example.
That he becomes archetypally possessed on acquiring wealth. And in the fuller versions, not in all the film versions, there's the point where the potential wife says, "You've lost yourself in this. You're an archetypal possession," and he goes, "Fuck off," and that's why he's miserable. So what a woman's looking for, or what the feminine's looking for in the masculine, is for him to go, "Oh fuck, you're right. You're right. Yeah. I've lost myself in this," and it's not. It's like it's no longer. The problem with archetypal possession and with Ebenezer Scrooge is that it doesn't serve what I'm going to accrue all this wealth to protect myself from suffering, and in accruing all the wealth, losing soul and opening himself up to endless suffering. And that's why he has this psychedelic experience to snap him back out into the realization that you are under this possession state that is actually creating the opposite of what you were looking for, which is the safety of love and community. Yeah.
Don't you love it when authors come up with these wonderful examples of these archetypal things we're talking about? I mean, the woman in a relationship like that we're talking about is the regulator. Mm-hmm. She's the one that lets him know it's great. He's like Icarus flying to the sun with his work. It's like, you can get burned up doing this.
Yep.
And I just want you to know that. I want you to be aware of that you have to keep your eye on the right thing. Here, it isn't about the money. It isn't about the power. It isn't about your ego. It's about me and these kids. It's about this family. Now, if that works, then they have a deep romantic relationship. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever seen a couple where she's complaining about him not helping around the house and whatever that has a deep romantic relationship.
Yeah.
So which came first? Was his obsession, his archetypal obsession come first that breaks that apart? Or did that break apart first and then cause the other? I mean, that's the thing you don't really know.
Yeah. And I think that's about the libidinal energy that's running up that spine in the four quadrants, which is like, because he's not giving his libidinal energy to her in love.
Yes.
Yeah. That dick isn't penetrating her; it's penetrating the business.
Exactly. That's his affair. That's his mistress. Yeah.
But hey, man, speaking of which, shout out Taylor Sheridan for Yellowstone, which gets this masculine, feminine stuff so fucking good. Soap opera, though it might be. Beth Dutton, famous line. She goes, "It's a woman's job to give a man perspective." To your point.
Yeah, that's
right?
exactly the point.
Yeah,
That's exactly.
interesting coming from this dark feminine of Beth Dutton, who is like
I know. I
Ali
know.
energy, just like
I know.
the bandolier heads around her neck and the blood on her fucking fangs. But she
Yeah, but
has that feminine, thing too.
she's always got in a big way. It's not just her finger. She's totally integrated in the feminine. She knows that even though a lot of what she does is a very masculine warrior and all those things, Kali, whatever that you're saying. And Kali is like that. I think when we get, Sekhmet, I know in the pantheon of the Egyptians is like that. She's female goddess of destruction, yet she's incredibly feminine.
Well, I think that's the thing, though, because I think the dark feminine energy that is in Kali is closer to the masculine. It's the feminine with more masculine integrated into it. Just like dark masculine has more feminine, right? So the relationship of dark feminine and dark masculine is that they're higher in the contrasexual. So Beth Dutton, to the extent that she is cultivating this dark feminine energy, it does appear to be higher in masculine, but really it's the masculine integrated through the feminine. So
yes. Yeah. I'm glad you said it that way, because when you're saying dark, you're not meaning shadow.
No.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. No, yeah. That's what I thought you meant at first. Okay. Right. Right. Yeah. It's totally different. Why don't you explain to our audience the difference between shadow and dark when we're talking about it?
Yeah, if things weren't confusing enough, dark and light, masculine and feminine energies are complementary. And like, if you think about it, like the light masculine would be the example I used before would be Andy Griffith, right? He's light masculine. In that he is kind of pure, he's kind of gentle, and there's not a lot of chaos involved. The darkness really is controlled chaos, right? Now, the dark masculine, to give it to you in the most, what would be a good one? Like Elvis, right? So Elvis has a lot of this chaotic energy kind of driven into him, or kind of he's woven into his personality, or at least the persona that he presents. But there's a lot more chaos. It's controlled to a certain extent, right?
Okay.
Shadow is disintegrated. It's fallen apart.
Yes.
It's fallen apart because it's lost balance, and that's what
it's in the shadow.
Yeah. Raw king energy. In fact, I mean, one of the sort of the ways I think Robert Moore says it, and people can correct me if this isn't right, but I think what he says is there is no such thing as raw king energy, because the minute it's raw king, it's tyrant automatically, because there's no balance. So you can't really have raw kingship without it automatically just defaulting into disintegrated shadow. Shadow and disintegrated are the same. Anything that's in its fullness is integrated. So when chaos is integrated, it's dark.
Got it.
And to the extent that chaos is integrated, the darker it gets. Right.
So can you?
No chaos. Andy Griffith has almost no chaos. Yeah.
Can you safely say that any raw archetype is not integrated? I mean, that just the definition of it would say that.
So, yeah. I mean, if anyone me, I'd love to hear it, but I'm pretty sure, because essentially what you now, I mean, I guess there is a distinction though, and the distinction that we should make is that shadow and archetypal possession are different things. So archetypal possession is when you're totally taken over. Like Robert Moore says, you don't want to be an archetype, right? Because that's when you're taking over. There's no ego left. You are a puppet for this energy that's moving through you, which is different than you being unconsciously driven by shadow aspects of one of those archetypes. So if you're cultivating, I don't know, like caregiver, archetype in the shadow is going to be the martyr, who gives everything, bleeds, to the point where the martyr is the caregiver whose care is no longer helping, it's hurting. You're caring for me so much that you're killing me.
No, these things are so hard. No, it's really good. That's really good explanation. We have to stop anyway.
Because Kierkegaard is like, he's so unapologetic. He's like, my point, my whole purpose in life is not to make things easier and simpler. It's to make them harder.
Mm-hmm.
And that one of the things I pride myself on, whenever I'm working with people, is like, if you leave here more confused, I've done my job proper.
Yeah, I do that too, but people don't.
I'm
like
here to give
hear
you
that.
better questions and to complicate the simple things, not to give you simplicity to the complex. And I am being a bit sort of like, sort of funny about that, because it's not always true. I mean, sometimes what we need is simplicity, but on the existential front and on the archetypal front, things often need to get a whole lot more complicated before they can actually get done.
Well, if you're dealing with complexes and pathologies of any sort, you definitely have to go through it being harder and worse.
Under pressure, everyone wants to simplify. That's how we get in trouble. Simplify.
Well,
simplify. Absolutely.
That's the reason why we're in trouble to start with, is because we try to simplify. The ego wants everything as simple as it can make it. It wants to see everything black and white, because it can avoid the black and immerse itself in the white, and that's not how it works.
You put people in collective panic, and they immediately start to see the world in black and white terms.
Right. And that's just what we're seeing now. Yeah. Okay, we got to go. And just as closing, thank you everybody for listening and going all the way through this. I hope you got what you came for. That's what we're trying to do. So please subscribe, and you'll get notification of we add one of these about every week, and be a part of our community and ask questions. Some people are doing that. That's great. We're there to answer questions and to clarify things or whatever. Or if you tell us something you don't agree with, that's great. That's what we like. So you can reach my website with what you see on the screen, and this is my email address. If you want to contact me directly, you can do that. I am practicing, so is William, practicing psychotherapy or whatever you want to call it, counseling, whatever. In the Toronto. It's existential counseling. Yeah, I wish I could say that. I like that.
You can. Title. Feel free.
It's not protected by the law.
Psychotherapy is.
Yeah, psychotherapy is. I know. Like, I can't call myself a psychologist, and sorry, I believe I am one, and so are you. I mean, we practice psychology, but we're not allowed.
By the way, if you Google me, Google gets the idea that I'm a psychologist. I didn't tell Google that I'm a psychologist. It just.
Okay. Yeah, that happens a lot. I mean, anyway, there's a long story I won't go into. But and we do remote work too, so you don't have to be in the area. Okay, that's my email address. This is William's, and I'll leave that up. And if William, you want to make any comments?
Thank you all for listening. Please push back and correct me. It's that moment where we're like talking about this raw archetypal energy. Is that necessarily flipping into shadow? If you know better than me, if you're like, I know exactly what Robert Moore said on that you missed, this is exactly why we have push-pull media. Please drop a line. Like, when people do that, I love it. I love responding. I love engaging with people. I love the idea that we can kind of collectively breathe air into this, these dark things, these dark mysteries, bring some light into it. So it is much appreciated.
And we're all learning. I mean, obviously, we don't know even a fraction of what there is to know. So if somebody out there has a different perspective, or even the right one, and we're wrong, I mean, that's fine.
If I'm an asshole, please call me one. Just be nice.
Yeah. Asshole's okay. That's good enough.
If someone was like, "Listen, can I just point out a way in which you're an asshole, and this is it, and they're right," I'll take it. No problem.
Yep. Absolutely. Okay, everyone. We'll see you next time, and take care, and bye-bye.